Our guest today is Dave Rusenko, CEO and co-founder of Weebly. It allows any business to build a website that works across any device. You can even build an online store on your phone through their mobile app. Dave Rusenko, welcome and nice to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
All right, who's your typical customer?
So it's very much people starting or growing their business. So people who, really entrepreneurs is the word that we use, but these are just the coolest people in the world because they had an idea, they had a passion, and they want to bring that idea to the world. Today in 2016, it's often through technology, and so we wanted to build a platform that helps empower them to be successful and grow their idea.
And how did you come up with the idea?
So the three of us were students at Penn State, and we just saw around us that there was a huge sort of demand for people wanting to create a website, having that online presence, but it was just so difficult to do it. So we started it, it was in early 2006. We wrote the first line of code as part of a class project, applied to and got accepted into the Y Combinator program that November, and then moved out to San Francisco full-time in January 2007 to pursue the startup.
So a lot of tech founders come from a handful of universities, right? Stanford or MIT, for example, but you actually turned down Carnegie Mellon and decided to go to Penn State. Why?
So I actually, very interesting question. I grew up overseas. So I was born in France, lived there for 7 years, and then lived in Casablanca, Morocco for 11 years. So coming back to the US, sort of my sort of estimation of the situation was, okay, I understood technology and computers, but to me the social education was an important factor. So I figured what better place to get a social education than a state school like Penn State.
What did you learn there?
Lots of things, I think, but really just, understanding technology isn't the only component. I think if you're going to do anything interesting in life, often that'll be dealing with people, right? And so I think just understanding, those interactions was just critically important.
So does that social education that you say you got at Penn State, how does that inform what you do now at Weebly?
Yeah, I mean, a big thing for us has always been about our culture. And I think culture is sort of an interesting word, and it's got a little bit of a negative connotation at times as maybe being something that's exclusive, but for us it's quite the opposite. So my favorite quote on culture comes from Bill Campbell, who was just speaking at a conference, and I heard him say, culture, it's not about the free food and the ping pong tables, it's really at its core, it's just about how people treat each other. And I think that just rang incredibly true to us, and it sort of helped us think, such a simple concept, but really helped us think about what was important and special about our culture. And we have really, really high expectations for how people treat each other inside the company. Our number one value, and most important, is radical respect plus honesty equals trust. And it's really this fundamental respect that everyone, while people may be doing different jobs, everyone is incredibly valued. Everyone is doing a really important job. And it starts by the way that we treat each other. It starts with respect, then the honesty, that leads to the trust.
Very interesting. What are some of the key things that you would say someone needs to do in order to put his or her business in a position to be a disruptor instead of being disrupted?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think probably the best thing you can do to be a disruptor is first to be on top of the trends, so just kind of understand the trends that seem very obvious to us here in San Francisco actually aren't obvious in other parts of the country or the world for another 2 to 3 years. So just by being sort of as part of that early adopter crowd, you are sort of naturally on top of the trends. And then at that point, I think it's really optimizing for learning. So instead of going about and optimizing your list for small incremental improvements, say, what's the biggest question? What's the number one thing that'll take me to the next level? And let's optimize for that, because once you do that, then you tend to rewrite your whole priority list.
You're 31 now, which means you started the company when you were 22. Did you always want to be an entrepreneur? What inspired you?
Yeah, I did. Growing up, I started a couple of companies in high school, and actually all three of us started a company before Weebly. So
oh, really?
My co-founder Chris started a regional ISP in the Philadelphia region in high school. My co-founder Dan started a social network for students studying abroad.
What did you start?
I started a hosted, managed, secure email company. So we, I think, have always wanted to do it. It wasn't, coming out of college, it wasn't necessarily a given that was going to work as a career path, but it's something we've always been really passionate about.
And you're all still good friends now? Sometimes, when you have that many co-founders, right? The chemistry can change over time, and it's not always easy.
It certainly can, and I think we've been really lucky that all three are still with the company. We're all still really good friends. We still hang out quite often and go out to dinner every other week. So in that regard, I think we've been lucky.
How many people have created a website with Weebly?
Sure. So there's over 40 million people that have created a website or an e-commerce store with Weebly. I think an even more interesting statistic to us, because it represents their success, is that over 325 million people per month visit one of those websites or online stores. So
I read a statistic somewhere that about a third of households in the U.S. visit a site that has been created through Weebly. Is that right?
That's now half. So half of the U.S. population will visit a site created on Weebly every single month.
That's astounding.
We think it's really remarkable because that represents people going to these businesses that entrepreneurs have created for themselves online. So that's really the success of the people who are using Weebly to bring their business online.
Has that level of growth surprised even you? I know that every time when someone starts a company, they want that kind of phenomenal success, though. Has it just come faster than you envisioned?
In many ways, yes. So to be completely candid, when we got started, we never imagined that we were going to be here in this position. We never had this take over the world game plan, right? It's just, I think, to me, the key to accomplishing something large is in a lot of small steps. And so we got started, we had humble ambitions, but we just kept taking small steps every day, and that oftentimes builds to something a lot larger.
What's next for you? You're now about to launch the 4th generation of Weebly.
Yeah, so we just launched Weebly 4, and I think the really exciting thing about Weebly 4 is this is the first time that we are fully transitioned to a complete platform to help your business grow. And so it involves the website, the e-commerce store, but also online marketing, SEO tools. So it's really, our vision of the future is that as you start a small business, as you have this idea that you want to take to the world and make it larger, today, technology is often a major barrier, whether it's really expensive to pay someone to do it, or it's just really confusing and difficult. And we want to create the type of platform that people can take their ideas, grow them, and then really realize the benefit from that.
What are the 3 best pieces of advice you can offer to an aspiring entrepreneur or business owner out there?
Yeah, I think, to me, it really comes down to 2 things. And at each step, you eliminate about 90% of people. So if you could do these 2 things, then you'll be ahead of like 99% of people. So the first is just to get started. That sounds really simple, but there are a lot of people out there that have an idea, they talk about it, but they never get started. And so that already puts you ahead of 90% of people. The second piece of advice is don't give up. So if you just go about taking a small step every day, before you know it, you've walked miles. And I think you'll often find that although those 2 things seem very intuitive or obvious, it's sort of what separates successful people from the pack.
Interesting. Do you have a 3rd tip in there as well?
3rd tip, I would say, is really to try to grow your business sustainably from the get-go. So it's always been really important to us to be cash flow positive. We've been cash flow positive more or less as a business since January of 2009.
Really?
Yeah.
How was that? How long was that from the time you started the company?
So we really started working on it full-time in January 2007. So within 2 years, we were cash flow positive, and it's the most amazing thing.
That is amazing, because normally it takes at least 4 years on average, right, for a startup?
And once you do, you control your own destiny. So you're not beholden to anyone else. So it's really, I think that's another thing that people really can focus on.
What do you do for fun? You have quite a few interests. You DJ, do you still do that?
Yeah, I do. I recently learned to play bridge to play with my in-laws. So that's a really fun game.
DJ and bridge.
Yeah.
Kind of like opposite ends of the spectrum there.
I got into stunt driving a good bit. So. And also another fun hobby is I have a ticket to space on Virgin Galactic. So hopefully in the next couple years, we'll be taking that trip.
Wow. And you have a 1-month son.
And I have a 1-month-old, yeah. So sleep is not on the calendar these days.
Who needs sleep? It's highly overrated.